Alright, what's up, folks? Rich Van Tassel with you, giving you our recap of Week 10. This is part 1, trying to get some done. We still have some games going final. Actually, just watched Kansas City kick a field goal to win. But the games that we do have final, we'll give them to you now just to get these over with. The Los Angeles Rams beating the New York Jets cross-country to move to 4-5, 3-2 on the road. The Jets dropped to 3-7. 9-6 was the final. It was an ugly game offensively for both teams. Fitzpatrick did not go for the Jets. Bryce Petty did, so two bad quarterbacks, and it reflected in the score. Case Keenum, 17 of 30, 165 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions, however. Todd Gurley, 21 carries, 64 yards, 3 yards per carry. Benjamin Cunningham, 6 for 40. The team altogether 34 of 125. 3.7 yards per rush. Kenny Britt, top receiver, 7 of 109. Tavon Austin, 2 of 19. Brian Quick, 2 of 16. Benjamin Cunningham fumbled and recovered a fumble. They had one sack. It was William Hayes, not Aaron Donald. Alec Ogletree had an interception. It sealed the game. Greg Zuerlein, 3 for 3 in his field goals. Nothing to really note in the return department. Bryce Petty, 19 of 32, 163 yards, 1 touchdown, that big interception. Matt Forte, 20 carries, 98 yards, 4.9 yards per rush. Bilal Powell, 4 for 37. They ran the ball well, the Jets, 25 carries, 139 yards, 5.6 yards per carry. Robbie Anderson, that is the top receiver, 3 for 69. Bilal Powell, 7 of 52, he had the touchdown. Brandon Marshall, 4 of 15. Now the Jets missed an extra point on their touchdown. That was big. Jalen Marshall fumbled, but he recovered it. They did have 3 sacks total. They were both, or all of them looked like they were split sacks. None of them for Leonard Williams, however. CJ Spiller, 3 kick returns, 59 yards. That's 19.7 yards per return. Not good. Nick Folk didn't kick any field goals. So, Rams getting the win. There's some talk about Jared Goff being ready to go at home when they're at home next week. The New York Jets dropping to 3-7. Really bad year for the Jets. The quarterback play has killed them thus far, and it is what it is. It's reflective in their record. You know, they were able to run the ball well, but they're just not getting enough out of the passing game that they'll live with the yardage Forte gives you. Minnesota losing to Washington 20-26. Washington coming out on top. Minnesota got out to a pretty good lead in this game, but Washington weathered the ship and shut Minnesota out in the second half. Sam Bradford was efficient, 31 of 40, 307 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. Jerick McKinnon, though, the rusher was the top rusher, 6 carries for 16 yards. Matt Asiata, 9 of 13. The team altogether 21 carries, 47 yards, 2.2 yards per rush. Asiata did have the touchdown, but the running game was just not there, and that's a position the Redskins have situation the Redskins have struggled with stopping the run. Stephon Diggs had a big day catching the ball, 13 catches, 164 yards. Kyle Rudolph, 5 for 69. He had a touchdown. Adam Thielen, 3 for 21. He also had a touchdown. Everson Griffin recovered a fumble. Only 1 sack. It belonged to Danielle Hunter. Nothing of note in the return games or special teams for that matter. Minnesota did not kick any field goals. I'm assuming they either missed an extra point or went for 2 and did not get it. Kirk Cousins, 22 of 33, 262 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. Robert Kelly did the bulk of the running, 22 carries, 97 yards, 4.4 yards per rush. Chris Thompson, 4 for 25, 6.3 yards per rush. The team altogether 28 of 128, 4.6 yards per rush. So a big disparagement there between the running games. Pierre Garçon, 6 receptions, 81 yards. Vernon Davis, 3 for 66, a touchdown. Jordan Reed, 2 for 41. Jamison Crowder, 4 for 37, and a touchdown. Chris Thompson lost a fumble. 3 sacks, but Ryan Kerrigan did not have one. It was 2 for Preston Smith, 1 for Trent Murphy. Preston Smith also had an interception. He had a good game today. And Dustin Hopkins, 4 for 4 in his field goals. So, Washington, quietly after the 0-2 start, is now 5-1-1. They're playing very well. Kirk Cousins is really riding the ship. Minnesota certainly coming back to... is this Minnesota's 4th straight loss, or have they gotten one in there? I believe it may be their fourth straight loss, so they're certainly struggling, and it's clearly the running game with the Minnesota Vikings. They're just not, without Adrian Peterson, they're not getting the job done. But, I don't care who's back there. You got to do better than this in the running game because you have no chance if that's how it's going to go the rest of the way. And you see that here. It's got to be figured out for the Vikings at some point. Kansas City came back on Carolina, really crushing Carolina and what they were trying to accomplish. They were down as much as 17-3 at least. It may have even been 17-0. But the Chiefs came back and won it on a late field goal. Alex Smith, 25 of 38, 178 yards, no touchdowns, 1 interception. Not surprising when Andy Reid offense, a lot of completions, but not a lot of yards. Spencer Ware, 13 carries, 61 yards, 4.7 yards per rush. The team altogether 20 of 91, 4.6 yards per rush. Tyreek Hill, the top receiver, 10 receptions, 89 yards. Travis Kelce, 3 for 31. Albert Wilson, 4 for 25. Marcus Peters had a big fumble recovery. It set up the winning field goal. Again, he hasn't been getting the interceptions of late, but he's really getting takeaways, and certainly a Defensive Player of the Year candidate. Tyreek Hill fumbled twice and recovered one of them. The team had 2 sacks. D Ford had another one. D Ford's been quite impressive this year. Eric Berry returned a touchdown, an interception for a touchdown, 42 yards. Cairo Santos 4 for 4 in his field goals. Carolina, Cam Newton, 23 of 38, 261 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. He was their top rusher, 12 carries, 54 yards, 4.5 yards per rush. He had a rushing touchdown. Jonathan Stewart, 13 of 39. The team, 29 of 39, 3.4 yards per rush, 1 touchdown. Kelvin Benjamin, the top receiver, 7 for 84. Devin Funchess, 3 for 56. He had the touchdown. Ted Ginn Jr., 5 for 44. Kelvin Benjamin lost that fumble. That was big. They had 3 sacks. One of them was split. Mario Addison had one. Charles Johnson split one of the other sacks. And Kawan Short also had a sack in this game. Trey Boston had an interception. Graham Gano made his only field goal. So, we'll start with Carolina. A team as good of a running attack as they had last year, as good as a defense as they had that last year, you would never have seen this loss. They would have been able to run the ball, way too effectively last season. They weren't able to do it here with a 17-3 lead at halftime. Their defense would have been able to sit back, play the zone coverages with Josh Norman. So you got to really look at this and look at certainly the departure of Josh Norman, but the fact that they're just not running the ball well. As for Kansas City, like we said, Marcus Peters is really turning into a big-time playmaker. Alex Smith is getting the job done. He, distributes the ball very well. 2, 4, 6, 8 guys caught passes. 6 of those 8 guys caught more than 1 pass. Of course, Tyreek Hill caught 10 of them for not a lot of yards. That's just the staple of Andy Reid's offense, and he runs it very well. So hats off to Kansas City coming back to get that win and keeping pace in a very difficult division. As for the Carolina Panthers, now really, really up against it. And the Denver Broncos went on the road and defeated the New Orleans Saints 25-23. Denver is now 7-3. New Orleans drops to 4-5. Trevor Siemian, not great, but not terrible either. 25 of 40, 258 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Devontae Booker was the top rusher, 24 of 76, 3.2 yards per rush. Capri Bibbs, 7 of 22, that's 3.1 yards per rush. The team altogether 37 carries, 103 yards, 2.8 yards per rush. So they didn't run the ball well, but they stuck with it, and that may have been the difference in this game. Just doing enough to keep New Orleans offense off the field. We know Denver has a good defense, but you even need help against the New Orleans offense the way they've been playing this year. Demaryius Thomas, 8 receptions, 87 yards, a touchdown. Emmanuel Sanders, 5 for 54. Jordan Taylor, 2 for 32. He had a touchdown. TJ Ward and Darian Stewart both recovered fumbles. They had only 1 sack. It was Shaquille Barrett. Darian Stewart had 2 interceptions, so certainly a Defensive Player of the Week candidate there. Brandon McManus, 3 for 4 in his field goals. For the New Orleans Saints, Drew Brees, 21 of 29, 303 yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Mark Ingram, top running back, 11 for 54.5 yards per rush. Tim Hightower, 8 of 21. The team, 21 of 80, 3.8 yards per rush. Brandon Cooks, top receiver, 3 for 98, 1 touchdown. That's 32.7 yards per reception. Willie Snead, 5 for 47. He had 2 touchdowns. Michael Thomas, 4 for 40. Tim Hightower, 2 for 34. Michael Thomas, though, fumbled twice and lost both of them. A lot of sacks for the Saints. They had 6 total. So they were getting pressure on Trevor Siemian, so that probably contributed to the turnovers that Siemian had. 2 interceptions by Kenny Vaccaro and Sterling Moore, not 2 each, 1 and 1, splitting the 2 total. And Will Lutz 1 for 1 in his field goals. So Denver getting a much needed victory on the road. You had to travel to New Orleans with a good offense. We discussed it in the previews of this game, that without Aqib Talib, they may have a hard time. They were able to limit New Orleans. They limited them to even less points than I expected they would have, and they were able to get the win. Simeon made just enough plays, and Drew Brees was not, he wasn't bad. Of course, he had the 2 interceptions, but you look at 21 of 29, 303 yards. So he really did have a pretty solid game, but when you take out what he did to Brandon Cooks, that is, then that skews the numbers back down just a little bit. So Drew Brees, don't get me wrong, he wasn't terrible in this game, but they really needed him to be A+, and he was more like B+ in this game, and that's why they lost. All right, so in a little bit, we will give you part 2 of the game recap. We still have some of the games from the 1 o'clock time slot going final. We will try to give you those pretty soon, so be sure to stay tuned for that. Thank you all so much.